We're recording. Good morning, good afternoon. This is Diya of the Cosmogenia, and today I have a very special guest. I'm doing a series called The Mother's Womb, Milk, and it's highlighting the knowledge and inner knowing that is inherent, transmitted and cultivated, nourished and honored through our connection to our maternal line. And it's a series that aims to evoke awareness about the primordial energies that are inherent within us, that are reawakening and reemerging at this time in the greater human narrative. And so for the first the first set of this series, I have with me a special guest, and she's special because we went to school together a long time ago. Her name is Lauri Lumby, and Lauri, just say a little bit about some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Diya. I'm really honored to be here, and it's so great to reconnect after probably many lives have passed since we were together
Yes.
in grad school. Yeah, thank you. I'm Lauri Lumby, and I'm an author, a writer, an educator, and a spiritual counselor. And I have 11 books that I've published so far. And I would say the heart of the books is, since our topic is self-actualization, is that journey of self-discovery, self-awareness, self-awakening, and really coming fully into our own. And the books I've published encompass a wide range of literary genres, from nonfiction, educational, to fiction, to poetry. And so that's the books. I'm a devotee of Mary Magdalene and have been studying her work for the last 30 years, and was really awakened by her in my teens. I was probably 12 or 13, and heard the Jesus Christ Superstar soundtrack for the first time, and realized that there was a woman that was powerful and powerful in her own right. And that kind of opened my eyes to different perspectives that I hadn't had before. I'm a teacher. I've developed probably 30 online courses that I teach and facilitate. I've got a Mary Magdalene Priestess training program that I've created and facilitate, and I work with people one-on-one as a spiritual guide and mentor, and shadow worker and butt kicker. So
Awesome. So I'm curious about the process of your publishing. Are they all self-published, or your own printing press or publishing press, or is it through?
the first book that I had published, Authentic Freedom, was done through a small independent press. And just as that book was being released, self-publishing through on-demand printing services was becoming more readily available and a viable option. And so from that point forward, based on, I love my publisher. Absolutely fantastic experience. It was the perfect experience for a first-time author, and I'm eternally grateful for their support, their presence, all of that. And I find that through self-publishing, I get more money. I make more money. To put it as simply as that. It's, there's a much larger royalty percentage in the self-publishing industry. And so that's where I've gone with the last 10 books.
Okay. I might have to do like a little one-on-one session to be like, hey, can you be like a little coach?
Oh, for
Need to coach you
sure.
for.
It's super easy, and well, I find it easy. And I have hired support at various stages of the process depending on the book and the genre. But the last several books I've done completely on my own. And
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. I'm gonna message you
Yeah,
after this because
absolutely.
it's something that's been it's something that's always been there. That's how my ancestral pilgrimage began,
Hmm.
with my desire to transform my dreams into a book, which is why I enrolled at Bay Path University in their MFA in creative nonfiction. And that didn't work. I hired, I started a 101 with a small publishing house during COVID,
Hmm.
and so much more information was coming. I was like, oh, I have to, process this, and I had to put that on the side. So the money that I initially put down, I ended up losing, which is,
Oh,
went toward, went towards her business, which is fine,
right.
but when I started when it came up again, I reached out, and then it was pretty much I had lost that. And so,
Mm,
and so the amount that she was requesting, I was just like, oh, that's way out of my range. And so like little opportunities kept emerging, or
yeah.
I would say little nudges like, hey,
Hmm.
you should get back to it. Um, and now with this, with the the recent request with my ancestral mothers, I feel that having something would be beneficial, would be helpful. So I will be reaching out to you
Yeah,
because it's like
definitely.
I have a series of ancestral dreams that would be a great fit for a great start, but I'm like, I don't know how to start. I don't know where to begin. So I would love
Yeah.
that. So okay, this is
Happy,
good.
happy to help.
This is good. This is good. And I get paid at the end of the month too. So I'm like, yeah, okay, good. Okay, I can, I'm like, these are the things that I'm like, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this because all right. So that is wonderful. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I also feel that, especially when it comes to re-emergent energies
Mhm.
and women's process of reconnecting and embodying, being able to share that in a way that's accessible,
Yeah.
economical, and
Mhm.
authentic, I
Yeah.
feel is very, very important. So with that, self-actualization, that's the first of the four. And I'm looking forward to geeking out on Patai's book with you. Like, I'm so looking forward to that one. Um, but before we can even get to that, let's start with self-actualization. So tell me, from your experience, what do you understand self-actualization to be?
Thank you. Let's see, I probably need to give a little backstory on
Mhm.
that and um, how I arrived at using that term as kind of a cornerstone for the work that I do, or a way to
Okay.
define what I'm doing.
Okay.
Um, I know when you and I discussed putting this together, one of the questions is about, the spiritual entities,
Yeah.
ancestors and such that have presented as teachers. And for me, my spiritual teacher is Jesus, and
Mhm.
with him, Mary Magdalene. And, a big part of that is my Catholic upbringing. But it goes beyond that, because I was having unitive mystical experiences when I was a child. And so I was already open and connecting and, receiving guidance and support and all that kind of stuff. And when I received a call to go into active ministry, and as I was moving through my ministry training, one of the core courses that was part of our requirement was one on contemplative practice and meditation. And, I went to 12 years of Catholic school, and here I am getting all of this stuff opened up to me. And I was excited and frustrated and angry at the same time, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm 30 some years old. This is what I've been looking for I was 26. I'm 26 years old. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. But I had no idea that this was even part of my Catholic tradition. It was like, I was mad because I'm like, why did they not teach this to us? We got the rote prayers and all of that, but none of the mystical, contemplative, intuitive experiences. So with that experience, that just opened a whole different world for me. And I started having, for lack of a better word, direct communication, receiving guidance and insight, and seeing really scripture and the Jesus story through a whole completely different lens. And then the Mary Magdalene piece came in, and that just tore open the idea of the feminine role within that story and how critical that was. And in particular, in contrast to, the primary feminine in Catholic tradition is Mother Mary. But it's a really, while the compassion and the mercy and all of that is represented through that imagery, it's also a virginal goddess, which who can relate to that, or not somebody that was called to be a mother at some point, you know what I mean? And so the Magdalene presented an earthy, real kind of woman, and one that was stepping outside of societal norms, that dared to teach, dared to preach, and who was empowered to do so. So as all of that was unfolding, I had an opportunity to begin to create and facilitate a program in the parish that I was working at, which they would call faith formation. So, but I never did it as faith formation. I always did it as personal formation. And specifically, taking this, interestingly, from the Catholic bishops, giving people the resources and tools to answer three questions. Who am I? Whose am I? What are my gifts and how am I called to use them? And so I did that work for however many years. And when I parted ways with the Catholic Church, I took all of that work and shared it within a secular, to a secular audience. And it wasn't until our time at Sophia that I had an opportunity to study the work of Abraham Maslow and Carl Jung and other developmental pioneers in the developmental psychology field. And it's from Maslow that I get the term self-actualization. And to me, it's becoming our whole and true and most authentic self. It's really knowing who we are, what our gifts are, what is it that's going to give us a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives, and ultimately, how are we called to be in service to the betterment of the world. And that's what self-actualization means to me. And, we live in, I want to say a culture, but ultimately I think it's a world that discourages self-actualization. It says it wants people to be fully formed, but then punishes people for trying.
Mhm.
And because, as you know, as we're approaching our wholeness, as we're approaching who we really are, one of the biggest things we have to cast aside is societal conditioning.
Yep.
And we have to step away from the herd and live according to our own truth. And the system doesn't want us to do that. So there's a lot of pushback and discouragement as we try to step into that role. But it's only in pushing back that we're able to get there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's, I don't know, funny or interesting or synchronistic. There you go. That you mentioned Maslow, because during my coaching certification program this past term, or last, or the first term, we received an article that actually highlighted, oh, Maslow took the concept from Blackfeet,
Ooh.
First Nations, right? So of course I looked into it, and first part of me was like, well, I'm not, or Blackfoot, sorry, I'm not surprised,
Yeah.
you know. And then there was, I think, in that particular article, some people said that he wanted to give credit, like he wanted to really highlights my time with the Blackfoot actually inspired this, but he could not
Yeah.
because of his peers, right? Like, how dare you
Mm,
put forth a psychological theory made for the white man, um, and say it was inspired by, the First Nations people that they were trying to annihilate. So, and in the Blackfoot belief, they don't call it self-actualization, but it's
right.
it's pretty much, in similar in alignment. And in their belief, self-actualization is your beginning point, right? And so
Mm,
it's like they believe that you arrive, that you're born with that, with all of that, and
yep.
it's the community that helps to draw that out, to like help you
Yep.
to remember. And so, you know cultivating that space so that you can really express it and embody it, and imbibe it, and then do your job, do your work. Whereas in the Western model, it's, you don't have that, you need this first and you need that first, and then when you have all of these things, you're self actualized. And so
Right.
it speaks to the later points of what you were saying, that society says this is what you should work towards, and then when you do, it's like there's an addendum. Okay, this no, and this no, we want you to
Right.
do it in this way because it keeps you, within the cogs of the machine, the way that we want it to be. So I find that very, very fascinating, in an individualistic culture.
I would love to get a copy of that article. If you
Oh
still
yeah.
have it
Oh,
available, send
I
that
do.
over to me. And I have to share a synchronistic story about
Hmm.
that. So, um, St. Ignatius of Loyola is one of my primary um, sources of inspiration for the curriculum that I've developed. And understanding where he came from and the culture in which he was born and raised, I feel a deep intuitive understanding, knowledge, hint, whatever, that he drew from Jewish mysticism, because there was a large Jewish population in Spain during the time that Ignatius was living, and there was a lot of overlap. In fact, there were a lot of Christians at that time, they would have been Catholic, that were actually Jews in hiding. And they were families that chose to be baptized rather than killed by the Inquisition. And so there was a lot of secret things being done in passing on that ancient knowledge through the Christian form, if you will, Christian practice. And I bring this up because as you're talking about Abraham Maslow wanting to share where he drew his understandings and beliefs from, I tried to do the same thing at the university that shall not be named. And I was outright told I couldn't do that.
Wow.
Outright told I could not say that Ignatian spirituality was a psychology. I could not say that psychology predated all of these people that were named in that school, but even though Sri Aurobindo could be acknowledged as a source, it was very strange. And it was one of the things that confirmed for me that it wasn't a place I wanted to continue my grad studies with, because how can you say you're holistic and open to all spiritual paths, but then outright tell me I can't pursue this area of study because it didn't fit their, I don't know, unacknowledged anti-Catholic bias.
That's a really good way to put it. And that actually, it's like a reflection of what I was experiencing in the human development program at the school that I'm at right now. And it connects to the 3 questions that you just, that you spoke to earlier in the program that you were developing. Who am I? Who am I as a woman? And like, how does that inform my why? Why am I here? Okay. Because my goal is to demonstrate those questions are researchable.
Yeah.
They are, if you know how to go about doing that, if you understand that the human being is transdisciplinary, like you need to study the human being from all these different aspects: genetics, anthropology, ethnography, sociology, arts, spirituality, religion, not just from one discipline. And I had a faculty member who was also my mentor, MIT background. Okay, very staunch systems background, that kept saying, your question has to be researchable. And I kept saying, my point is to prove that it is. And so the next iteration of the assignment, he said again, it has to be researchable. And so I got to a point where I was just like, you know what, this is not working for me. And that's why I transferred over into the education program. And I told, my new mentor, I said, look, because he even said, there's some faculty that won't be accepting of, the things that you want to put out. And I said, here's how I handle that. I try to have a conversation first. If that doesn't work, I drop them like a hot potato. And I search for the next one that's willing to be open and learn, because it is also a reciprocity of learning and educating. And so it's, I get that academia, there are certain standards within academia. I understand that, to be able to discern from opinion to what's grounded in lived experience, because I don't want to say fact to make it seem like it's an absolute, but what's grounded in lived experience of cultures and lineages. But at the same time, when you're investigating that, you're investigating lived experience. And I'm coming to you with a wealth of lived experience, ancestral dreams, different from lucid dreams. These ancestral dreams answers those questions. And so it's just me needing the academic structure to demonstrate how. So it's not
Mhm.
like I don't have those answers. I'm trying to demonstrate the how.
Yeah.
And it was, oh, Lauri, when I say it was frustrating, like when I started to feel it in my body, that's another indicator. Once my body starts to speak, it's like, okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna take a step back,
Yep.
listen to what's coming up, bring it back to you. And if you're still pushing up against that, bye.
Mhm. Mhm.
Bye bye. And I think that's also something the ancestral mothers in particular, because it's been a world that's operated on the father,
Mhm.
and the father's influence and the father's dominance. And the thing with the reemergence of the mothers is the body is there's a reciprocal relationship with spirit and body.
Mhm.
And that's so very important and a very important part of this process of self-actualization. And also a term I like to toss in, also self-realization. I
Yeah.
think that's more in alignment with what
Yeah.
what you're exploring, with what we're both exploring, because it's realizing, becoming
Yes.
aware of that which is inherent
Yes.
and listening to our ancestral beings, our spirit
Mhm.
beings, our guides, which, leads me into the next question. Have your ancestral mothers contributed to your process? Or if not your ancestral mothers, ancestral guides or spiritual beings, have they
Mhm.
contributed?
Absolutely. And it's, I would say, three primary areas where I'm aware of that um, physical ancestral connection
Hmm.
along with spiritual ancestry. And when I think of spiritual ancestry, that's where I would put Mary Magdalene and Jesus and all of those um, lineages of monastic contemplative um, moving towards self-realization. And it's interestingly, I would call it the matriarchal tradition of the institution because it's all hidden, and it's not something that you learn in 12 years of Catholic school. It's not something that you learn in CCD or Sunday school. It's something that has to either show itself to you or you have to go looking for it. It's not just a readily available. Um, so I would acknowledge that as my spiritual ancestry, because to my knowledge, I don't have any Jewish um, ancestry in me, though I also haven't done a ancestry.com DNA test yet. My dad claims we're part Jewish, but I'm not. He also claims we're part Native, and I haven't seen any proof of that either. So we'll see. Um, so I would call that my spiritual ancestry. As far as like physical lineage, where I first became aware of a draw that I can now acknowledge as spirit driven, was in my obsessive interest in anything King Arthur.
Mm.
And, I remember high school, grade school, high school, college, I was just consumed with finding every single version of the Arthurian legend I could find. And, read everything I could get my hands on, watched every movie I could get in connection with, and then discovered Mists of Avalon, and that kind of brought all the pieces together. And I got it. I'm like, I don't ever have to read another King Arthur book ever again because this book says it all. And while I know there's controversy about Marion Zimmer Bradley, um, that book and a couple other in that series are unbelievable in their accuracy and she had some sort of deep connection to ancestral truth that came through in those books. So that and the primary character of Morgan Le Fay was what I was really drawn to. And I understand now, looking back on all of that, that there's this strange spiritual connection between the Morgan Le Fay character and Mary Magdalene. And I see them both the same in my mind. And I don't quite know what that's all about, except I do know that there is a Magdalene tradition in Glastonbury, which is modern day Avalon, which, they claim that Mary Magdalene and Joseph of Arimathea were both in Glastonbury and brought the Jesus story there. And they claim to have certain relics. It's a long tradition. And I do have Celtic ancestry, or I will say I have, I lost my place. Where was I going with this? So with all of that, that opened me up to, the only word that was available at the time was Celtic magic. So I found every book at Llewellyn that was based on Catholic magic and Catholic tradition and practices, and gobbled all of those up, and discerned what felt authentic to me and what did not. And there's such a parallel between Celtic practice and Catholic practice that it was just effortless and natural to me. And I also feel like likely ancestral memories. I know this, I understand this. This feels intuitive, it feels natural. And I discerned joining a coven and discovered that I can't judge the individuals or the collective except to say there was something that I experienced as missing. Or ultimately a patriarchal interpretation of a matriarchal tradition made by women.
Yeah.
So a patriarchal interpretation by women of a matriarchal tradition. And yeah, and so it was expressed in very hierarchical kind of ways, which didn't resonate with me at all. Then recently, probably the last few years, I've really been drawn to my Irish ancestry, and that's my mother's family. And all the women in our family have magical gifts that it's only our generation where it's really where my sisters and I are really, and my cousin are really acknowledging it. All of the women that we know personally, the generations before us obviously weren't able to do anything with that knowledge or that wisdom or that intuition. All raised Catholic, all suffering with anxiety, depression, panic attack disorder, agoraphobia. And so I have observed that, been guided to do a lot of ancestral healing and clearing around those things. And have really opened myself up to connecting with that matrilineal line and going as far back as what I was guided to understand was told, the original Irish people. So the first people that found their way to Ireland and where they came from and how they got there and what their tribal experience was like. And it's just really amazing. Yeah.
Where do they come from?
Well, as I was told,
Uh-huh.
and I'll have to send you I guess I'll say the channelings or the messages that I received. So you and I talked a little bit about
Yeah.
this previously. The Celts were not the first people in Ireland. That was a later migration from Central Europe. And the original settlers of Ireland, as I understand it, came from far east. India, via Iran, Iraq, coming over the mountains. And so it was, in the heart of the birthplace of civilization. And, and I think likely going all the way back to Africa as the most original, looking at the migration paths of, because we understand that the birth of civilization was in Africa, and where did people go from there? And so there was an eastward movement and then a westward movement. And this was 10,000 years ago. I don't remember the exact numbers. They have archaeological evidence to support the first humans on Ireland and when they came there, and they have archaeological evidence of their settlements, and this was before Bronze Age. They didn't have tools yet other than stones and whatever. But the earliest arrivals were dark curly hair, dark or hazel eyes, ruddy complexion, olive toned, not pasty white like we think of most Irish people. But we know that melanin changes as people don't need it.
Right.
Yeah, so over thousands of years, that need for a high melanin content decreased. And so, the race evolved. But yeah, and it was the way I understand it, very similar to First Nations in the way that they lived. And I'll say First Nations before they encountered patriarchy. And so it was, communal, egalitarian. Everyone had their role based on, number one, what their gifts were, and number two, what the needs were of the community. And
yes, I love so many points, but I love that you mentioned egalitarian, and where what you did was based upon your gifts. Like that's really how you are defined. And that's how my ancestors have come to me. It's like they would come and say, this is what we are. Like, this is what we do. It's not I'm this Black person, I'm this white person.
right.
It was always, I am the keeper of secrets, or we are the keeper of secrets. Okay, they're elders, they're medicine women. Got it. Right.
Yes.
Or they would show up as warriors. They're protectors. Okay, I got it. Right. So it's so refreshing to hear another say that based upon what's inherent and what they've received from what is there. I love the distinguishing between that spiritual lineage that's accessible to everyone, regardless, right? You connect to it, it nourishes you, by all means, let it help you grow. And then you have the direct biological, socio-political aspect of it. And then I'll even add that at least in the African and Indian
Mm-hmm.
traditions, your spiritual lineage is what made your biological lineage, right?
Mm,
And so when I hear people say, "Oh, your spiritual lineage," I have to say, I have to discern, oh, okay, they're talking about the greater spiritual teachings everybody has access to,
right.
as opposed to spiritual ancestral lineage, because at least, and
Mm,
I say this because I have ancestry from both places, and
mm-hmm.
in doing my cross-reference research, that's what that is. Our biological ancestry is created from the spiritual ancestry. So
Mm,
no matter where we reincarnate, how we reincarnate, how we look when we dip, different
right.
reincarnations, we're still connected to that. It's the spirit that really feeds us and helps us to remember.
Mm,
And so
mm,
I kind of just wanted to add that for, for those that would listen, because it's not just, I'd say it's both and, right? You
right.
have your
Right.
greater spiritual lineage that, again, anyone has access to, that can be nourished from. But when it comes to very specific ancestries, it's, our biological ancestry is defined by our spiritual ancestry. And no matter where we
Mm,
reincarnate or incarnate, we still have access to that. We'll always have access to that.
yeah.
Um, can it be cultivated? Absolutely. I think it takes that process of reconnecting, that process of reawakening too.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you're open to it. Um, what else did I wanted to mention? Oh, letting people speak to their narratives,
Yeah.
right? Like in hearing you talk about, the Irish and how that has come up for you, it's like, like automatically I'm like, oh, that's another project. Ooh. Like I'm excited about that, because there's this university professor from University of South Florida, and there are like articles of smaller, smaller media outlets that are picking it up. I'm like, I keep seeing new ones written, and I'm so excited because his work is, this particular research project he did in working with anthropologists in East Africa as well,
Mm,
um, was on researching the medieval Swahili people
mm,
and utilizing ancient DNA to demonstrate that, yeah, East Africans contributed to the grandiose settlements that have been found along the
mm-hmm.
coast, because the dominant narrative says it wasn't the Africans that contributed to it, it was the Persians and the Indians.
Right. Right. Right.
And his work pretty much debunked that. It was no, the Persian men and the Indian men and some Indian women as well, traders, trading,
Mm-hmm.
came in and came together in union with the African women,
Mm-hmm.
that and at that time, pretty much, mostly, for the most part, 99.9% of the cultures on Africa is matriarchal.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the children that were born of those unions carried on the mother's tradition, and the men came
Mm,
into that, right? And some of the articles, he states that for them to be successful traders, they had to honor that.
mm-hmm.
And what validated that, I guess you could say, it's reciprocal.
Yeah.
The Kilwa Chronicles is an orature of, the medieval Swahilis, and it speaks about the Persian integration, right? So that was the oral stories.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of scholars were like, oh no, it's just myth. It's just folklore. It's not, it has no weight. And ancient DNA said, oh, yes, it does. And so, so just like, yes, let the people tell their stories.
Yeah.
You absolutely need DNA. And I'm so happy that his work is published, because I'm taking it a step further. I'm like, ancestral
Yeah.
dreams, past life memory, right? Um, and so yeah, I'm just loving your talking points, and let the people tell their stories, let the ancestors speak through their descendants.
Yeah.
It's so very important, because the more you tell a people's they didn't contribute to anything, the more they believe that, and the more
Yeah.
they silence all of the
Mm-hmm.
voices that came before them, more they silence their ancestors. And it's like the time of the re-emergence. They're like, oh no, it's too imbalanced, too many wrongs, they've got to be righted,
Mm-hmm.
got to be righted.
Yep.
Ah, wow, I'm loving this. Like, you pretty much answered all the questions that I asking. I'm like looking, I'm like, oh, she answered that. She went through that. Whew. But a big thing I do kind of want to toss in as well is, because a lot of my work is heavily on ancestral mothers,
Yeah.
matriarchal traditions, and bringing that to the forefront. I would love if you could touch on that. I think it was a blog post that you did. I remember I sent you a message. I was like, how do you pronounce that? How do you pronounce that? Because I think that's what I heard, but I'm not pretty sure. Can you recount that experience? Because it tickles me. I love it.
Which
It's like
blog post was it?
the one with the three wise women. I don't remember the name, if it was Sabine or is the one where you went in and they came to you and
Oh,
they were,
yeah.
yeah, that
Yes,
one.
yes, yes. So I have to give credit to Amantha Murphy for the word shebeen.
Should
And
be.
yeah, and that is her understanding of the word that the Celtic people would have used um, to acknowledge their shamans.
Mm.
And her work is focused on, she calls it Celtic, but I think the energy I get behind it is that it's more ancient than Celtic. Like, this is pre-Celtic Ireland. And so she talks about, well, she has a book called The Way of the Shebeen, and she teaches a program or does a retreat program on initiating people into accepting that role, if that's what they're called to. And I'm not sure what you wanted me to cover on that. What did you want me to speak
Your
to?
experience, no, your experience of them speaking to you. Your
Yes, thank
like,
you.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I had an opportunity to go to Ireland in 2017, I think was the year, 2016 or 17. And one of the places I went to was the Giant's Causeway, which is in Bushmills, which is in Northern Ireland,
Okay.
which is currently under, I guess, British rule. And at that visit, so the Giant's Causeway is this amazing place. It's volcanic, or it was volcanic, and what's notable of it is the landscape. So the landscape it's on the shore, and it's these huge pylons of hexagonal lava chutes. And so they're just like these towers all over the place. And it's the whole landscape is that. And it's just a breathtaking, amazing place. And it's all basalt. So it's dark black grounding stones. And I share that because when I was at the Giant's Causeway, I found a heart-shaped basalt stone, and that's what I brought back with me. I left an offering and I brought the basalt stone back with me. So I was sitting in meditation holding that stone and connecting with my matrilineal line, and I just kind of saw myself going back and back and back and back and back, and envisioned myself sitting on the shore of the Giant's Causeway as I'm holding this stone and trying to connect with my ancestors. And I literally felt my ancestors grab me by the shirt collar and pull me and say, "You're not from there." And they planted me in County Kerry.
I love County Kerry, by the way.
Yeah, I know. And that's where, all of our immigration records show our family coming from County Kerry. And so that's where they planted me. And that's when they just kind of unfolded the story and said, we're the original inhabitants. This is where we came from. Explained the way that they live, kind of planted pictures in my mind of what they looked like. And so explained that part of my lineage. And then, and I haven't written this part out yet, then also mentioned that I'm from that lineage, but also from the lineage of the Tuatha Danann, which are the legendary magic people of Ireland. And they're said to be, the spirits that live beneath the hills. They're the fairies. And I've always understood them to be much more than that. Like, they're not fairies. They're otherworldly beings that came here.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they showed me when the Tuatha Danann arrived and how they arrived. And again, I still have to write all of that out, but it just really resonated with me. And it also brought together so many pieces. One of which was, I think you're probably too young to remember this movie. There's a movie called Willow with Val Kilmer plays the lead role, and the woman that became his wife, and I can't remember her name right off the top of my head, Jean Marsh played the villain. And the whole movie is protecting and saving this magic child. And she's a Laura de Danann, child of the Tuatha Danann. And so that went all the way into me in 1980, when that movie came out. And I've never forgotten the name, the scene, the baby, the movie. I mean, it's just all of that. And then what was the other piece? There's this crazy book that might be a whole nother discussion. The book is called Solara. And no, the author is Solara. The book is called Starborn.
Ooh.
And she describes the different galactic races that came here and where they settled and how to know what lineage you're from. Ooh. And the lineage that resonated with me, and there were all these weird things that connected it, is what she called Anu, A-N-U. And they're the ones that settled. They were the Tuatha Danann. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff about that. So I'll leave it there.
Wow. Synchronicities. Okay. just a little, if you have a little more time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
like, I feel like I'm babbling. I'm like, I hope I'm not using up too much of your time. So please go on.
No. Oh, okay. Synchronicities abound. So before I even knew it was an ancestral pilgrimage, that was when I did the creative nonfiction program.
Yeah.
I haven't finished it yet. I'm not even sure if I'm going to finish it. So our summer workshop was in Dingle,
Mm,
and I stayed in Tralee for 2 weeks. This is like 45 minutes outside of Dingle. And so when I got there, when I got to Ireland, it's like the first 7 days, the spirits would wake me up just
mm,
before dawn. And when I would wake up, it would be like this affinity, like this pull, pretty much. Like it's a
mm,
pull to get outside and watch the sunrise. And that was in Tralee. But when I
mhm.
got to Dingle, the whole week for the writing workshop, I would open my eyes and I would see, like in the dark of the room, like these silver vine leaves just kind of just like manifesting itself over the bed. And I'm just like, well, that's pretty. Thank you.
Right.
You know, that's so
Thanks.
beautiful. Thank you. Right. And for 7 days, just 7 days straight, I stayed there throughout my entire 90-day visa. And I think it was halfway, not even halfway through it, towards like after I finished the writing workshop, I ended up connecting with this Irish woman that was going through her own awakening
Mhm.
process. She was speaking with the medium and he was helping her to open up. And of course, I'm like, oh, she speaks with the medium. I was like, mediums,
Right.
they're not like the traditional Indian or African medicine person. That was my bias at the time.
Right.
Um, and so I met with her a couple of times, and when I told her how I was traveling, she was like, just stay with me until your visa's done. And she was like, I have a place in Arklow, which is just south of Dublin on the other side.
Yep.
So staying with her, the Tuatha, the Danann were very vocal. Um, oh gosh, what was one of the divinities? He's the one that the Dogda hit I
Yes.
think,
Dogda.
yeah, Dogda.
Yeah.
So I remember being in her kitchen one night and it felt like water rushed up and filled the kitchen. And I was just like, hi, how are you? I don't know who you are. I'm here on a journey. I don't know what it's for yet, but I'm not here to cause any issues or whatnot because I had a little run-in with more,
Right.
right? With doing the dance to protect my mom, and she was just like, you don't wake sleeping powers. Like there are certain things that need to be asleep at this time. Like don't wake them up. So he shows up like and like it was like I automatically knew,
Mhm.
and I just didn't know how to pronounce his name, but I was like,
Yep.
all right, you're a king. I was stuttering on the D part. So I went online and looked and I was like, oh wow, this is so amazing.
Right.
There's a dream I had that night where I'm trying to take pictures in the dream, and then it's like in this wooded area. Ireland is green and beautiful and forested and wooded. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And then these three trees start to move to evenly space themselves out. And I'm like, oh, I gotta take a picture. So I take a picture and it's showing up blurry in the camera. And I'm like, oh man, it's just for me to see right then and there. I can't go out and
Right.
show people. And so as I'm watching this, I start to hear twinkling bells, like this
Mm.
beautiful twinkling melody, like wind chimes, but not wind chimes. So I
Mhm.
turn my head to the left to see. I'm like, no, it's not. And then I turn my head to the right towards it and it gets louder. So I'm like, oh, what's going on? So I go and I follow the sound and I come across this being and she says, call me Vivian. And I'm
Mm.
like, okay. And she's like, I want you at the Hill of Tara. And so I'm like, where's the Hill of Tara? Where's the Hill of Tara? And I'm like, okay. She's like, for the remainder of your time here, try to be at the Hill of Tara. And I think she wanted me to be there for an entire week, but
Yeah.
I didn't have an entire week. I didn't have the funds for an entire week. So I told my hostess and she was like, it's not too far from here. Let's just get in a car and go. Get in a car and go. We get to the stone and I'm like, I'm not really feeling anything here. But what are those things over there? And I'm thinking they're bushes. And so we go and we see this little pathway and we walk down the pathway and they're actually tops of trees. And I'm like, oh, this is magic. And so I'm like, most
Wow.
magical place at the Hill of Tara is actually the outskirts, at least for me at that time. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if I went back today, how different it would be. So like there was like a very palpable presence,
Yep.
right? And it felt old, like really
Mm-hmm.
old. And I got so excited. I took pictures. And when we got back to Arklow, looked at the pictures and you're like, is that a face? Just like some of, yes.
Wow.
And there was a dream I had when I was back in that space and my skull was
Mm-hmm.
slightly elongated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like, I gotta research this because I know some people were talking about, finding remains with elongated skull, out in the Peruvian areas, but you know what I mean? Like having that connection or being revealed that it's like,
Mm-hmm.
were you guys here a long, long, long time ago before the counts, right? And just
Yeah.
so just to hear you say that is just like, oh my gosh, wow, look at that. Like just it's so connected. And then lastly, Anu.
Yeah.
Uh so I have a really deep connection to the Nile Valley and India, right?
Mm.
A lot of the ancestral divinities, Nile Valley, bottom
Mm-hmm.
line. Um, and then of course some now West African divinities, but they, according to how it's been revealed to me, they migrated to that area. So there's a
Right.
very particular divinity. The Greeks call her Neith.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the way she would show up to me in the dream was very different from how people understand her and have
Mm-hmm.
portrayed her or interpreted her image. And so I remember always calling her name and she never ever answers to that name ever. And so I was like, what is your name? What should I call you? Just last year, before I moved out to Mesa, I was in Tempe. And right as I was coming out of sleep, they said, oh, it's the Anu. It's the Anu. And so I was like, the Anu. And they're like,
Oh
yeah,
my
the
God. I
Anu
got full
Ra.
body
There was like,
chills on that.
so so they were like, and then they were like, yes, and the people were the Anura. So you have Anu
Mm.
as the deity and Anura as the people because of how they defined it and broke it down. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take that in and process it as the cultural identity that's being passed down through
Mm-hmm.
generations. And each time I would do a Sankofa journey, they would explain a little more. So I'm like, okay, so that's my cultural identity. I totally got that. But what is the name of this divinity? Like, give me your name, please. And my mom, she's like, she will reveal it when it's time.
Mm.
And I'm like, what do I call her? So much is coming up and I just don't. I opened a book that a scholar had dedicated to her to writings about her temple because her temple's under the water, which
Mm-hmm.
says a lot. Whenever I hear that a temple suddenly sank beneath the water and you can't access it, it's like these are mysteries that she doesn't want just anybody
Yeah.
to latch onto.
Yep.
And so in his book, he has a statement that's in French. I don't speak
Mm-hmm.
French. I don't read French. So I asked Google Translate, what does this mean? This person says that, the way the Egyptologists have transliterated her name by adding the T is secondary, and that really she's just the feminine form of Nu. And the thing with the Kemetic hieroglyphs is that we're adding vowels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like, so then just add the A and it's Anu because that keeps coming up. And so I'm like, okay, there's already a statement here by somebody that studied in the field. And so, okay, that's my little note. This morning in my dreams, I'm taken back to the house I grew up in. So whenever I arrive
Mm-hmm.
at that house, it's back to the beginnings, back to
Mm-hmm.
formative years. And so it's a lucid dream. And I'm in the dream and I'm like, what is going on here? It's like the weirdest thing. My brother's doing some weird stuff. My youngest sister is like sleeping in his bed, but it's the baby, like the bed when he was a child. And I was like, what is going on here? I don't understand why we're here. And then she pops up. And a lot of my earlier ancestral dreams happened like that. I would be having a
Mm-hmm.
lucid dream, and then they would just insert themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she came up, it was as if she was like peeking from under something. So she was still hidden
Mm-hmm.
because she didn't want to completely interrupt the dream, but to reveal, okay, this is me, like this is my name. So she was like, do you remember the diurnal pots? Because they came to me and asked me to draw one, blah blah blah, like years ago. So I'm like, yes, and she had on the Kemetic necklace, like the really big ones with the beads, and it was green, but her skin, she was darker than me, dark skinned woman, eyes filled with so much power. Oh my gosh, when they show up
Mm-hmm.
like that, I get really excited. So she shows me a statue that was made in her image. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, that's great. So now I understand what your headdress means. And then she goes, it's Anu.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming to me finally to just clarify it, because when people use the Greek names for these divinities,
Mm-hmm.
for me, they don't respond because that's not their name.
Right.
And the narratives created around their name waters down
Mm-hmm.
their origin stories. And so I don't want to get too much into names because that's actually one of our talks. But for the divinity to come and say, yes, that's the name,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm going to go by. And it's so helpful to have a scholar even mention, you know, she's actually just the female form. And this way of writing her name is just secondary to how it initially should be. And
Right.
so, you know, so just to hear you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not just the biological connection, because my pilgrimage took me so many different countries across 3 continents,
Yep.
but it's also at how the spirit informed that. And so to hear Anu, it's like, are they an extension, or is it just another cultural reference? I don't know. And you know what? I'm just gonna bask in the joy of hearing it, because I just think it's amazing. Just so
Well,
amazing.
it's so interesting because I don't own this book anymore, but I feel like there's a connection between, I feel like the Anu people were Egypt and Ireland. Like, I feel, and I don't remember exactly, but I feel like there were two places that were kind of part of that.
Well, it would make sense because
Yeah,
people left the continent in waves.
yeah,
Left
yeah,
in waves. So it makes sense. It's
yeah,
a plausible theory. You know what I mean? Like the
yeah,
only time someone would be able to definitively say no is if they'd have definitive evidence to say
right,
otherwise. But so it's
right.
highly possible, you know, and just for me to see that that was my entryway
Hmm.
into an ancestral pilgrimage that I didn't even know was an ancestral pilgrimage
Right.
until it ended. Until it ended. That's
Yeah,
when it all came full circle.
yeah.
Um yeah, I don't think it's like a coincidence. I definitely think it's a
No.
part of that
Yeah.
interconnected web. So oh, I love it. See, I love this. And this for me is what makes that self-realization process or self-actualization process so phenomenal and
Yeah.
nourishing and yummy and exciting. It's
Yeah.
things like this, you have those experiences and you're like, I know, like I just know.
Yeah.
And then you go travel or you read something or they pull you from one location to another
Yeah.
and they recount your origin narratives. They recount your
Yeah.
narratives to you, for you. That's
Yeah.
how ancestors bring balance and bring healing. Like it's
Yeah.
when you're open and you're actively doing the work and you're on the right track, and it looks like you're about to fall off the track, they
Right.
they grab you by the collar and say, "Okay, you did good work, but we're going to clarify some
Yeah.
of these things for you." I love that. And
Yeah.
that's something that is something the world needs, and however which way it shows up for people. It's just something the world needs right now to help
Yeah.
bring
Yeah.
balance and righting the wrongs. Like they've said that to me. It's about
Yep.
righting the wrongs. And I'm like, can I just do this part? And they're like, no.
No. No. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the message that I've gotten to is we have to get back, you know, to strangely quote Joni Mitchell, we have to get back to the garden.
Yeah.
We have to come back to those ancestral roots and the original egalitarian tribal relationships. And obviously in a different world, because we have technology now,
Mhm.
that they may or may not have had then. We don't,
Mhm.
there's some stories about that as well. But
Yeah.
um, it's this species is at a do or die. It's either we're going to destroy ourselves or we're going to figure this shit out. And the ancestors are saying, figure the shit out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you say this. You said that because one, there's a medium. I adore her. She's phenomenal on YouTube. Tangent. The medium in Ireland. When I met that man, like I said, I was skeptical. He opened my eyes because I sat in front of him,
Mm,
right across from him, and Leela, I think her name was, she sat between us at the
mm-hmm,
table. Spirit started speaking. It was just like this palpable change in his face and in his
mm.
eyes. I started to shrink back in my chair. She had to get up and leave because the energy was that big.
Yeah.
Like spirit was literally telling me I wasn't dancing enough, that I needed to do it at least twice a day. I should be doing it 3 times a day. So just on that medium,
Yep.
just because
Yep.
I kind of forgot forgot that I had mentioned that. So that this medium, she was talking about natural disasters
Mm-hmm.
happening today. And she said it's not Armageddon, but it's a call for people to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, yes, the earth is not happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a call for people to wake up and help the earth.
Yeah.
And she was like, she had said that they're not gonna do the whole wipeout again. because because there's a lot more people that are
Mm,
awake and connected now
yeah.
than all of those other prior times. And so when she said that, I was like, oh, okay.
Mm,
Because in 2014, the mother said to me, humanity changes at the precipice of their destruction, of its own destruction.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, so to hear a medium say that, it confirms what was already revealed, but for someone else that I've never met, never had a phone call, nothing, just to come out and say, hey, they're not going to do the whole reset button. They're just a lot more people. We'll give them a chance. And if not, we'll save the earth,
Right.
and yeah, I'm laughing at it, but it's like, okay, there's a little more. They're giving us a little more. And they're like, okay, we're
Yeah.
watching you. We're
There's
watching.
scientific support for that as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm reading Barbara Marx Hubbard's book, Conscious Evolution, and it's my second reading of this book. And I'm getting just whole different perspectives on it than I did the first time. But she talks about the scientific proven pattern of evolution and how every single time evolution reaches a crisis point, that it facilitates a change, and even more than the change, it catapults. So it's instead of I can't remember there's a physics term that she uses. So entropy is one stage. It's like energy can only propagate itself up to a certain point before it starts having diminishing returns. But there's a there's an opposing physics force that doesn't allow for complete annihilation. Instead, it takes that crisis point, and let's just use human beings as an example. So we're in the process of destroying ourselves. We've reached entropy, and evolution is saying, okay, so you're not going to destroy yourself. You're going to catapult yourself into a different species of human. And she calls it the spiritual human, I think is what she calls it. But it's, yeah, so there's scientific support for what you're getting intuitively through your ancestors and what was told to you by that medium. Yeah.
Wow. See, I love it. I guess that falls well within the realm of, creating the new earth. And
Yeah.
the way to do that is through you, through the new you. And through the new you is connecting and integrating and realizing how interconnected we are, because we can't operate on the old patriarchal, I would say overwhelming, stagnant patriarchal energy. Because I like to acknowledge there's the paternal aspect that can be loving, right? But this patriarchal energy of consumption, consumption to the point of stagnation, that is not working. It's like it's like the heavens and earth was like, well, everybody has a right to try life on the planet and in embodied form, but you did too much damage. So
Yep.
we either transform or be absolved back into the great void. And we'll rethink this whole humanoid thing because it's just like it's been a little too much. Because I remember a reset. Like I remember I only remember one. I think when it comes to remembering past lives, it's remembering the ones that are most valuable for the life that you're currently in.
Yeah.
Because we've had many past lives and I don't need to remember all of them. I don't need a circuit overload. I just remember one. So, and had times where I'm like, just do the reset because the world is just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's really interesting to see that and to hear it. And so to hear the mothers say, we want devotees, it's like they're wanting to anchor their energy, because what I've come to find is the practices that are within this particular lineage, if women in particular, if they do the practice, they radiate a certain type of energy. And I know that from firsthand experience. Like I experience it daily when I go out, right? And I just had a client say to me, she's like, I don't know if it's because I'm ovulating or because of something else. And I was like, well, what were you doing? Like, tell me what you were doing. What were your intentions? And she explained she was actually doing a very specific practice to help her manage what was going on in her life. And I said, that's what it was. It was your intentional ritual that you were doing. And so within the request for devotees, like that is what I would take women through. Like these are very specific ritualistic practices that you need to do daily, whether you're going out or not, and you will see the influence you have. And it's phenomenal to see that from before you did it to after doing it, the way people respond, the way the environment responds and communicates back to you in dream time as well, so energy is the thing. People like, come on, if people are like, oh, I don't believe, electromagnetic pulses, your heart, hello. So, and it's really it's a thing. So for them to say we need this anchored, we are at that point. We are at that point where it's like teeter tottering, and so it's like, all right, anchor it so it can level out and tilt in the way it needs to replenish the energy and things like that. This is amazing.
I know.
Excited. Oh, this is great. I love it. I love it. I love it. A good 90 minutes. For those of you that are watching afterwards or listening, take this on the road if you need to, or if you're baking, or if you're just sitting enjoying the sights. It's a good nourishing 90 minutes. I'm so glad that you're doing this with me, Lauri. I think it will help be an entryway for anyone looking to deepen their practice, be it through the Magdalene lineage or through a different Divine Mother lineage. Like it's here. It's here.
It's here.
So this is the first of 4. We have names and naming coming up. We're going to, explore Patai, the Hebrew goddess. That's the last one. And I forget what the second one is, but I'll have that available in the description box. So I'm going to put this video up on my YouTube and the audio on my podcast. And I, invite you to do what you feel is best for you. Totally open to, it's a shared collaboration. So with that, Thank you so much to
Thank
our listeners.
you.
And thank you, Lauri. Oh, I'm excited. Excited. And so with that, I'm going to just stop the recording and again, thank you so much. Mwah.
Thank you.